Okay, so this is the finished piece, ironed and sewn together. That's it. Next thing to do, as I mentioned, is to introduce the back fabric and the wadding. Now what I'm going to do is the scalloped edge, which is going to be from here. This is going to be rounded off round here and then going round like this, like that, round here and then round there, same on the other side, like that, and round. And what that's going to do, apart from give it a nice edge, that's also going to finish off the edge of the actual piece. Now normally with quilting, what you would do with patchwork quilting, you would use a piece of bias binding and you would attach that over the edge, something like this. This is called double fold bias, and what you would do, usually you would use single fold bias on a quilt, because this edge here is where the centre line is the edge of your fabric, and that's going to be the edge of your quilt, and that's only a single thickness. So normally with quilting you'd use single fold bias, which is this basically opened out and folded along the centre like that, and then you would attach it and then you would fold it over and attach it again on the other side. What that does is, this is the point where the fabric is inside, where the edge of the fabric is, and that's now 2 layers thick. So that's what you call single fold bias. This is double fold bias. The name is easy to remember. This has got 2 folds in it. Sorry about that, the battery ran out. Okay, right, we're back on now. So as I was saying, this is double fold bias. This is more for, you know, other types of home decor really, but for quilts and patchwork you would normally use single fold bias, which is easy to distinguish because at the moment this has got double fold. Single fold bias, before you use it, has a single fold. Okay, that's the way to remember. It's how it is before you've used it. So normally when you do, I'll just sit down. Normally when you do quilting, you finish it with a piece of bias. Let's just pretend right now this is the right kind. Okay, sew it on first, then fold it over, and then you would normally hand sew the other end, the other side, usually the back side, and that would be your finished effect. That's great when you're doing straight edges. When you want to do a scallop, you can stretch bias tape. That's a good thing about it, it's stretchy. And that's great when you're doing the curve, the outside edge of your curve. When you get to the point in the middle, it gets a bit fiddly. You have to do mitered corners and things like that, and that gets fiddly when you're doing them quite often. If you're just doing a corner on, you know, around a square piece of fabric, that's fine. But if you're doing internal corners on a scallop, that starts to get really, really complicated. So what I wanted to do was, instead of doing that, I'm going to do this in the normal sort of, which is to sew the thing right sides together and leave an edge unsewn, maybe a small piece, maybe about sort of 10 centimeters wide, something like that, and then you turn the whole thing round, right way round, and then you can just hand stitch that edge closed. It's just the way you would make linings for bags. There's lots of different sewing methods that would involve that kind of sewing. It's called bag lining essentially. It's not the way you normally do quilting, but for this kind of edge, what it does give is a nice sharp edge, and because I'm using the same fabric on the top as I am on the bottom, there's no particular reason to put another binding of fabric on the edge. Okay, so what I want to do next is make a template which goes around the edge of the piece. What I want to have on this corner, just lift this up to show you, on this side, on the end, I want to have it so that the circle goes all the way around, from this point all the way around in a circle, unbroken, right the way around back to there again. So what I needed to do was work out how wide the circle needed to be. So what I've done is measured diagonally across this block, and that's given me, and plus a little bit extra. I don't want to go any further than that point there, remember. So I've measured that, and it gave me a measurement of 14 inches, which is going to be the diameter of my circle. And to make my template, what I've done is I've got a piece of paper. This is thick paper. It's actually lining paper. It's really useful to have. And I've just folded it in half, half again, and then half again. And what I've done is I've measured 7 inches, which is obviously half 14, from that point there to this point here and to this point here, and then staggered measurements all the way around, which has given me a lovely arc to follow. What you can do, just to make it easier, you can join the dots if you want to, or you can just cut it by eye, it doesn't matter, and then just cut that out, and that will give me a perfect circle. So I'm just going to do that now. There we go, one perfect circle. So then all I need to do is line that up onto my pattern and mark out where the edge of the fabric is going to be. So I'll just do that now. Right, so that's my first circle drawn out. You can just about make that out, possibly, maybe. Anyway, I'll repeat this process on the other end because I want those to be the same, and then in between I will work out how many of the scallops will fit into the space in between. It might just be the one, but we'll see. So that's my second one done, and then I'll just work out how many, might be 2 small scallops in the middle. One large one would look not quite right, I think. Yeah, let's measure the space. 15 inches, which is just an inch wider than the total diameter of my circle. So really, I don't want to do a single scallop there. I would rather do 2. Yeah, so I'm going to work out where to position the centre point of each scallop, and I'll come back to you with that. Okay, so I have now marked out the final scallops. I've got 2 into that space. I don't want to go into too much detail about how I worked it out, but basically found the centre point, and then the centre point between these 2 points here, marked the top line, which is the same as, is parallel to the edge of the 2 end scallops, so that the height doesn't go beyond or not stick out as much. I want them to be even all the way along. And then really got my paper template, put it on top, marked and lined up where that point is, and that point is, and then literally drew around the edge of the template. I did it first of all with chalk, and then went over it again with pencil, because I don't want the chalk to disappear before I get a chance to do anything with it. So, so that's now marked up, ready to go. The purpose of this, if anyone's wondering why I've used pencil, it's not going to show on the final thing, because this is my cut edge. It's the edge I'm going to cut of the fabric, then I will be sewing a 1/4 inch in from that, so don't worry, it's not going to show on the final piece. Okay, so last thing to do, I've got my piece of fabric ready to go now. The last thing to do is just to get my wadding. This is my fabric. As I say, it's just a piece of plain fabric, the same style as the edging. And then I'm going to want the wadding. Now you'll notice I'm putting the fabric on top and not the wadding in between. And that's because I'm going to sew this bag style, as I mentioned before. And doing that, I need to have it so that it's backwards. That means that the piece on the inside has to be on the outside. So your third layer has to be on the outside of the sandwich. And then you've got your underside layer, right sides together with your outside layer. Now I'm using wadding, which is quite common to use in quilting. You can use cotton batting, which is this sort of stuff. It's more like a felt. You can also, I'll show you the wadding. This is wadding, and it's just like a hollow fibre. You can find it on the inside of pillows, that sort of thing. It's often used to quilt clothing and that kind of thing, so it's quite rough to the feel, but it does the job. It's quite thin, this stuff, it's meant for quilts. So I'm going to be using that, so it doesn't matter about the size, we just cut a piece roughly to the right size. Do that. So, and then that piece goes on top, and that's my sandwich. Now, because this wadding is rough to the touch and also has quite a loft to it, if there's any danger that your sewing foot catches on it, what you can do is at this point put a piece of thin muslin or stabilising fabric or something like that over the top of this, and that can then be sewn through. It helps to protect the foot against catching on it, especially if you use a walking foot. And also that's useful as well if you decide to do this the other way around, which I may do. I'll show you in a minute why. And then that can be either left on if it's muslin, or it can be torn away afterwards. Okay. Okay, so I've got a piece of muslin here. This is just very, very fine cotton weight fabric, and you can use any fine weight cotton for this. It doesn't have to be muslin. This is also known as cheesecloth, but you know, this is the best stuff. It's really cheap to get hold of, and it can be left in place afterwards. I don't have to tear it off. So I'm going to put that in place, and that's now ready to go. To show you what I do next, I need to flip this over. So let's just do that. Okay, so this is our sandwich the other way up, and what I need to do now is pin this together. This is the only time I pin, really, because I just want to make sure all these layers stay in the right place, otherwise the sewing will make it go all over the place and it won't look neat when I turn it the right way around. So you need to do this in a nice flat surface where you can lay everything out flat, make sure there's absolutely no wrinkles, no lumps and bumps in there, and then you just literally pin it in place in quite a few places. Make sure it's not going to be where your edge line is going to be. And then the final thing to do is to cut the edge of the fabric all the way through all the layers, and that's your final finished shape. So I'll do that next. So that's that pinned together now. So all I need to do is finally to cut around my pencil marks, and then I have my piece cut out. There we go, that's all done now.